My name is Rosalind Hart, and I was 67 the night my son-in-law stood up at his own wedding, held up my gift in front of 200 people, and told the room I'd ruined his big day. He called it a coupon. He called it cheap. He called it, and I remember this part exactly, the kind of thing you'd give someone when you don't actually care. He said all of that with a piece of paper worth $410,000 shaking in his hand. He had no idea what he was holding. By the end of that night, he would. Welcome back to Alpha Mom Stories, where the gift they call cheap is usually the only thing in the room that money could never buy. Stay with me to the end. Drop a comment and be sure to subscribe. My name is Rosalind Hart. I'm 67, and for 34 years I worked as a residential appraiser and then a small-time landlord, the unglamorous kind. I never flipped a house on television. I never wore a blazer with shoulder pads and pointed at spreadsheets for a camera. I drove a gray sedan to rundown duplexes with a clipboard and a flashlight, and I learned to see the truth of a property before anyone had dressed it up to be sold. My husband Walter used to say I had X-ray vision for value. He meant it as a compliment, though it took me years to hear it that way. I can walk into a house and tell you, within a season, when the roof will need replacing. I can look at a couple standing in a kitchen, pretending to imagine their future there, and tell you within about 4 minutes whether they're going to make an offer. Numbers don't lie to me. People sometimes do. I've simply had 34 years of practice telling the difference. Walter and I bought our first rental the year Chloe, our daughter, was born. A narrow 3-bedroom on Birchwood Lane with a leaning porch and a furnace older than our marriage. We paid $11,000 down and spent every weekend for 2 years scraping paint and replacing pipe. We rented it out for $200 less than market because Walter said a fair landlord sleeps better than a rich one. We paid it off in full the year Chloe turned 20. There has not been a mortgage on that house in 11 years. Walter passed 3 years ago. A quiet man to the end, the way he'd lived. He left me the rentals, the sedan, and a habit of talking to him out loud when the house gets too quiet, which I am not embarrassed to admit I still do. Chloe grew up watching her father and me count coupons at the kitchen table on Sunday nights, not because we had to buy the end, but because thrift was simply the water we swam in. I never wanted her ashamed of that. I wanted her proud of it. For a long time, she was. Then she met Grant. I want to be fair to him, because a cartoon villain teaches you nothing, and Grant is not one. Grant grew up in a house where the driveway held 2 leased SUVs that got traded in the moment the paint lost its shine. His father Roy owns a used car dealership 2 towns over and has spent 30 years selling the appearance of success to people who can almost afford it. His mother Deborah has never once, in the 4 years I've known her, worn the same handbag to 2 family gatherings in a row. Grant absorbed the lesson of that house the way children do, without ever being taught it directly. He came to believe, somewhere very deep down, that what a thing looks like and what a thing is worth are the same fact. He is not cruel by nature. He is frightened, the way people raised on appearances often are, that if anyone looks closely enough, they'll find nothing real underneath. I understood that about him almost from the start. Understanding a person's wound doesn't obligate you to let them reopen yours. The first small sign came 18 months ago, at a Sunday dinner at my house. Grant walked through my front hall, looked at the modest brick colonial I've owned outright since Walter and I were 40, and said, kindly enough, "It's cozy in here." He meant small. He meant dated. He glanced twice at my hands while I served the roast, at the age spots and the wedding ring I still wear, the way you glance at something you've already decided isn't worth a second look. He wasn't wrong that the house was modest. He was wrong about what modest meant. The second sign came at Christmas, when Roy asked me, not unkindly, what I'd done for work, back when. Past tense. As if a woman my age couldn't possibly still be doing anything at all. I told him I'd been an appraiser. He nodded the way you nod at a hobby. I let both moments go. I have learned, at 67, that being underestimated is sometimes the safest place in the room. You get to watch. And I watched. By the spring, Chloe and Grant were engaged, and the engagement, I noticed, ran almost entirely on borrowed shine. A drone videographer for the proposal video. A ring that Grant later admitted, at a dinner where he'd had one glass of wine too many, was basically financed, but who isn't these days? A save-the-date shot on a rented yacht that belonged, it turned out, to one of Roy's dealership clients. I said nothing. I watched Chloe, my daughter, start speaking in Grant's voice about things that used to matter to her, and I felt the particular grief of watching someone you love quietly edit themselves to fit inside somebody else's frame. I had one thing I intended to give them that no rented yacht could touch. I'd been sitting on it, quite literally, for 28 years. The Birchwood Lane house. 3 bedrooms, a fenced yard, good bones, fully paid, no mortgage, currently appraised, by a colleague, not by me, because you should never appraise your own gift, at $410,000. I had planned, from the week of the engagement, to give it to them free and clear as a wedding gift. Not a check toward a house. The house itself. Walter and I had built it for exactly this, a beginning that no bank could take back from them in a bad year. I told no one. Not Chloe. Not my sister. Not even the appraiser I hired to confirm the value, who I paid extra to keep his mouth shut. I wanted it to be a surprise worthy of the word. I did not yet know that Grant had already decided, long before that wedding day, exactly how he intended to read whatever I handed him. The provoking moment came 6 weeks before the wedding, on a group text with a name Chloe had chosen with what I now understand was a straight face, Whitlock Wedding Squad ring. Grant wrote it at 9:40 on a Tuesday night. I remember the time because I was rinsing a coffee mug when my phone buzzed against the counter. Quick logistics note for everyone, it read. We're finalizing the open bar upgrade and the photo booth package, and honestly it would help so much if extended family could step up on the gift side this time instead of waiting for the registry. Big life moments deserve big gestures, right? No pressure obviously lol. 3 laughing emojis followed that no pressure. I have been in enough closings to know that no pressure attached to a dollar figure is never, in fact, no pressure. Deborah replied within 2 minutes with a heart emoji and the words, "We'll make sure it's memorable." I did not reply for a full day. I have learned, the hard way, that the space between an insult and your response is the only part of the exchange you fully control, and I did not intend to hand mine away for free. When I finally wrote back, I kept it plain. We're taking care of something special for you too. I'll handle it my way, in my own time. I sent it and set the phone face down on the counter, the way you set down a hand of cards you don't intend to reveal early. If you have ever felt that particular chill, the one where a family member prices your love out loud before you've even opened your hand, I want you to type "I felt that" in the comments right now, because you are far from the only one, and I promise you it gets easier to hold your ground. I had already decided what I was giving them. What that text told me was not to change the gift. It told me to change how I delivered it. The investigating, if you can call it that, started almost by accident, the way most true things do. My niece Mia works as a paralegal at a title firm 2 buildings down from where I used to appraise for 30 years, and she still calls me for coffee every few weeks out of old habit. 3 weeks before the wedding, over decaf at the same diner Walter and I used to visit every Sunday, she set down her cup and said, "Aunt Rose, can I tell you something and you not repeat where you heard it?" I said of course. Grant came into our office. Not officially. He was asking one of the loan guys, off the record, whether a family gift could be structured as, quote, basically cash we control, end quote, before it's even given. He wanted to know if there was a way to have it wired instead of deeded, so it could be, and I'm quoting him exactly here, liquid. I sat with that for a moment. Liquid. As though a house, a home, the place where a child might someday learn to ride a bike in the yard, were a puddle to be poured wherever was convenient. I did not confront anyone yet. I have learned that the first piece of a puzzle only tells you there is a puzzle. It doesn't tell you the whole picture. The second piece came 10 days later, from Chloe herself, though she didn't know she was handing it to me. She called crying, not about the wedding budget, but about something smaller and sadder. The florist had raised the price on the centerpieces, and Grant had told her, in front of his mother, that the shortfall was your side's problem to solve, since your family's basically loaded and just being weird about it. Basically loaded. I asked Chloe, gently, what he meant by that. She went quiet on the line for a moment and then said, he thinks you have way more than you let on. He's seen the rental listings you get in the mail. He thinks you're sitting on property and just being, I don't know, stingy about helping us start our life. There it was. Not confusion about my finances. A theory about them. Grant had built, in his head, an entire narrative in which I was a wealthy woman playing at modesty, and he had decided the correct response to that narrative was resentment, not respect. The third piece, the one that told me everything, came from Mia again, 4 days before the wedding, this time not over coffee but in a single text with a screenshot attached. She'd been added, by mistake, to a group chat meant for Grant's groomsmen, the kind of accidental invite that happens when someone is planning a toast and fat thumbs the contact list. The screenshot showed Grant's own words, timestamped 2 nights earlier. NGL, if Rose hands us some lame envelope tomorrow instead of actual cash, I'm gonna say something. People need to know what real generosity looks like. My parents are literally covering the open bar. Hers can cover a card? Below it, one of his groomsmen had replied with a laughing emoji and the words, rip her a new one at the toast, lol, she'll never see it coming. I read that on my back porch with a cup of tea going cold beside me, and I will tell you honestly, my first feeling was not anger. It was something closer to sorrow. Not for myself. For Chloe, who was about to marry a man who had already scripted a public humiliation of her mother into his wedding night, and for Grant himself, who was so hungry to be seen as generous that he'd decided the surest way there was to make someone else look small on camera. If you've ever watched someone you love plan, in writing, to embarrass you in front of a room, and had to decide in that quiet moment what kind of woman you were going to be about it, stay with me, because what happened next is the only part of this story I'm actually proud of. I did not call Chloe to warn her. I did not confront Grant. I did something I understand, at 67, works far better than either. I called Marco. Marco Dilios and I worked closings together for 2 decades before he opened his own title and escrow office. He is 61, wears reading glasses on a beaded chain his granddaughter made him, and has closed more houses than most people have driven past. I trust him the way you trust someone who has watched you at your most careful, professional self for 20 years. I need you to do something unusual for me, I told him over the phone. I need to give away a house at a wedding reception, in front of 200 people, in a way that cannot be mistaken for a coupon. Marco laughed once, then heard something in my voice and stopped. Tell me everything, he said. I told him about Birchwood Lane. I told him about the group text, about Basically Loaded, about the screenshot Mia had sent. Marco was quiet for a long moment. You don't want to just hand him a piece of paper, he finally said. You want the room to understand, in real time, exactly what it's worth. And you want it to be unimpeachable. Notarized, on the record, no room for him to spin it as some kind of joke. Yes, I said. Exactly that. We spent the next 2 days building it properly. Not a gimmick. A real, binding instrument, the kind I'd watched hundreds of families hand across a closing table over the years, except this one was dressed for a wedding instead of an office. A formal real estate transfer voucher, tied specifically to the Birchwood Lane property, notarized, valid for 90 days, requiring only the couple's signatures to begin the transfer of a fully paid, mortgage-free home worth $410,000 into their names. Marco arranged for his associate, a notary named Renata Suarez, to attend the reception quietly, seated at a back table, dressed like any other guest, holding nothing more suspicious than a clutch purse with the paperwork folded inside. In case, I told her on the phone, the moment calls for it to become very official, very quickly. I had the voucher itself printed on heavy cream cardstock, no gold trim, no ribbon, nothing that announced itself. Just a plain navy folder, the same shade Walter had once proposed to me with, tucked inside an old fishing tackle box because he said he'd rather see me smile at something practical than something pretty. I still have that folder. It felt right to use it again. 2 nights before the wedding, sitting alone at my kitchen table with the voucher in front of me, I nearly changed my mind. Not about the gift. About the delivery. I thought, more than once, about simply mailing it to them quietly the week after, sparing everyone the scene, sparing Chloe the sight of her mother and her husband at odds on her wedding night. I picked up the phone to call Marco and cancel the notary. I set it back down. I thought about the screenshot. Rip her a new one at the toast, she'll never see it coming. I thought about basically loaded, said in front of his mother while my daughter cried over a flower bill. I thought about 34 years of walking into houses and telling people, gently but clearly, the truth of what they were looking at, whether they wanted to hear it or not. Grant had already decided to make a scene. The only thing left for me to decide was whether the truth would be in the room when he did. The wedding was held at the Aldergate barn, string lights strung wall to wall, 200 chairs and cream linen, a band that had clearly been paid a great deal to sound effortless. Chloe looked, I will say plainly, luminous. For a moment, watching her walk down that aisle in her grandmother's altered lace, I forgot every screenshot Mia had ever sent me. The gift table sat near the entrance, a long farmhouse plank covered in white envelopes and gift bags with tissue paper fanned just so for photographs. I placed my navy folder among them without a card, without fanfare, and went to find my seat. The toasts came after the plates were cleared, the way they always do. Roy went first, loud and easy, the kind of speech that gets applause because it's short. Deborah followed with something about gaining a daughter, her voice catching in exactly the practiced place. Then the best man handed the microphone toward the gift table, and I understood, the way you understand weather before it arrives, that we had reached the part of the evening Grant had been waiting for all week. He didn't open my envelope first. He was too clever for that. He opened 3 others, reading each one aloud with real warmth, an envelope from his aunt with a generous check, a spa certificate from a college friend, a bottle of wine older than the marriage was about to be. The room laughed in the right places. He was building, I realized, watching him work the crowd, a staircase, and my gift was the step he intended to fall dramatically off of. Then he reached for the navy folder. He opened it, scanned the first line, and I watched his face do something I recognized instantly from 34 years of watching people misread paperwork. He saw the word voucher in bold serif at the top and the words value to be arranged upon signing in the smaller print beneath it, and he decided, in under 2 seconds, that he was holding nothing at all. Okay, he said into the microphone, laughing in a way that had an edge under it, so, this one's from Chloe's mom. A pause, timed for effect. It's a voucher. Someone near the back laughed uncertainly, unsure yet whether that was a joke. Like an actual coupon, Grant went on, holding it up so the room could see the plain cardstock, no gold foil, no ribbon, nothing that photographed well. 4, and I'm reading this correctly, value to be arranged. At my own wedding. He looked, deliberately, in my direction. I love you, Rose, I do, but I gotta be honest, this kind of ruins the moment a little. Everyone else showed up tonight. I think it's fair to say that. 200 people went quiet in that particular way a room goes quiet when it senses something has crossed a line it can't quite name yet. Deborah's hand went to her collarbone. Chloe's face, from where I sat, had gone perfectly white. I did not stand up right away. I let the silence sit exactly as long as it needed to. Then I reached for my reading glasses, the ones I've worn to every closing I ever handled, and put them on. It's a small gesture. Walter used to say it was the only warning anyone ever got that I was about to be very, very serious. Grant, I said, and my voice, I promise you, did not rise even slightly. Before you finish that thought, I think it's only fair the room understands what they're looking at. I nodded once, toward the back table. Renata stood, smoothed her dress, and crossed the barn floor with a clipboard against her chest, the same steady walk I imagine she uses at every closing she's ever attended. 200 heads turned to follow her. My apologies for the interruption, she said, pleasant, professional, the voice of someone who has done this 1,000 times and knows exactly how much weight it carries. I'm here on behalf of Dilio's title and escrow. Given the size of this particular gift, the notary of record needs a brief acknowledgement from the recipients before the evening continues, purely a formality, but the paperwork is time-sensitive. She turned a page. The voucher currently in your hand, she said to Grant, in the same even tone you'd use to read a weather forecast, is a binding real estate transfer voucher for the property at 214 Birchwood Lane. 3-bedroom, single family, fully paid, no existing mortgage. She glanced up, just briefly. Current appraised value, $410,000. The number landed on that room like a dropped plate. Somewhere near the middle tables, I heard a fork click against a glass, someone reaching for a toast that never came. Deborah's mouth opened and did not immediately produce a sound. Roy, I noticed, went very still in the way people do when they realize they have badly misjudged an audience. Grant looked down at the cardstock in his hand as if it had physically changed weight. He started, and stopped. Then, because some instincts are slower to catch up than others, he tried once more for the room. Well, she should have just said that instead of, a voucher sounds like nothing, how was I supposed to? Grant. A voice cut in from a table near the dance floor, warm but firm, and I felt my chest loosen slightly, because I recognized it. Harrison Cole stood up, a silver-haired man in a gray suit who I hadn't seen in almost 6 years, not since I'd appraised the strip of commercial lots he later developed into half the shopping plaza on Route 9. He was there, it turned out, as a +1 of one of Grant's co-workers, a coincidence I could not have engineered if I'd tried. I don't know most of you, Harrison said, addressing the room now, not just Grant, but I know Rosalind Hart. She appraised property for me for almost 15 years, and I can tell you the woman does not exaggerate a number, not once, not ever, in either direction. If she's telling you that folder is worth $410,000, I'd bet my business on it being worth every cent. The room did the thing rooms do when they've been given permission to believe something. A ripple of murmurs, someone near the back saying "Oh my God" under her breath, Chloe's hand flying to cover her mouth. I stood then, because it was time and because I wanted to be at eye level with my family when I finished what needed saying. I kept my voice low, the way I always have in a closing when the numbers do the talking and I don't need to raise mine to be heard. You called it a coupon, Grant, I said. You told this room I ruined your wedding. You said everyone else showed up tonight. I let that sit exactly as long as I needed it to. I've been showing up for 28 years, I said. I bought that house the year Chloe was born. My husband and I paid it down, dollar by dollar, so that whatever happened to either of you someday, there would be one roof over your heads that no bank, no downturn, and no bad year could ever take back. I wasn't going to hand you a check you'd spend on a bar tab. I was going to hand you a floor you'd never fall through. Grant's face had gone through several colors by then, landing somewhere close to gray. I didn't know, he said, quietly now, the microphone still limp in his other hand. I swear, I didn't. I know you didn't know, I said, and I meant it kindly. That's rather the whole problem. You decided what my gift was worth before you'd bothered to find out. You decided, weeks ago, in a group chat with your groomsmen, that whatever I gave you tonight, you'd use it to make a scene, because a scene where you're generous and I'm small was easier to believe than the truth in front of you. I watched that land. Mia's screenshot, I noticed, had done its quiet work before I'd even needed to mention it by name. I hadn't, and I never would in front of that room, but Grant's face told me he understood exactly which words I was referencing, and that was enough. Chloe was crying now, the kind of crying that isn't performance, the kind that comes when a person finally sees, all at once, something they'd been managing not to look at for months. Mom, she said, I'm so sorry, I didn't know any of this. I believe you, I told her, and I did. Chloe's crime that night was not cruelty. It was silence, the same silence I'd forgiven in gentler men before her father passed, and silence, I've come to believe, is a debt you get the chance to repay, not a sentence you serve forever. Then I told them what I'd decided, because mercy and consequence, I've learned, can sit at the very same table. Here's what happens now, I said, to the room as much as to them. The house is still yours. Every dollar of it. I am not taking back a gift because one person in this marriage mishandled it in public. That was never Chloe's failure. I looked at Grant directly. But the voucher will transfer into Chloe's name alone for the first 2 years. Not because I don't believe people can change, but because trust, like a mortgage, gets paid down in installments, not handed over in full on the strength of an apology. In 2 years, if the man standing in that house has become someone who reads a gift correctly before he decides to humiliate the person who gave it, Chloe is free to add his name to the deed herself. That will be her decision to make, not mine. I closed the navy folder. Renata has the amended paperwork ready whenever you're prepared to sign it. Tonight, or Monday morning at my kitchen table. Either is fine with me. I sat back down. The band, God bless them, understood the moment well enough to start playing again within 30 seconds, something slow, something that gave 200 people permission to stop staring and start talking quietly among themselves instead. Grant found me an hour later, near the coat check, alone. He'd taken off his jacket, his tie loosened the way men's ties go when the night has gotten away from them. I owe you an apology, he said. A real one. Not the wedding night kind. You do, I agreed. I built this whole story in my head about you, he said, quieter now, more honest than I'd heard him in 4 years. About your family being loaded and pretending not to be. I think it was easier than admitting my own parents spend money they don't have to look like they have plenty of it. I didn't want to marry into that same thing. And then I did it anyway, tonight, in front of everyone. I studied him for a moment. It was, I'll admit, the first true thing I'd ever heard him say. Sorry is a beginning, I told him. It isn't an ending. You have 2 years to show me, and more importantly to show Chloe, which one it turns out to be. He nodded, and for the first time since I'd met him, he didn't look for the nearest camera while he did it. The months that followed were not a fairy tale, and I won't pretend they were for the sake of a tidy ending. Grant took a second job on weekends, quietly, without posting about it anywhere. He sold the leased car his father had talked him into and bought a used one outright, in cash, from a dealership that was not his father's. Small things. The kind that don't make good photographs, which is, I've come to think, exactly the point. Chloe calls me now most Sundays, not to ask for anything, just to talk, the way she used to before Grant's version of a good life became the only version in the room. 2 weeks ago she told me Grant had asked, on his own, whether Marco could walk him through what a mortgage actually costs a family, in real numbers, so he'd understand precisely what he'd almost thrown away. I take that as a fair sign. I still keep the navy folder in the drawer where Walter's proposal ring once sat. I don't need it for anything now. I keep it the way you keep a tool you're proud you used well. If you've ever been underestimated by someone who mistook your quiet for having nothing, I hope this reminds you that quiet and empty have never once been the same thing, and that the truth, said calmly, in your own time, on your own terms, is still the loudest thing in any room. Thank you for staying with me through this one. If it meant something to you, drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from, and subscribe so you don't miss the next story. I'll see you in the next one.